Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the Methacton School District August 27th, 2024 Board of Directors meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge. The public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. All board members are present except for Ms. Purdue and Ms. Shonda. So next is guests and scheduled speakers. Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you, Madam President. This evening we have two presentations, the first being the new teacher induction. I'd just like to share from Dr. Walsh, our Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, that the Methacton welcomed 22 new teachers to the district this year, where they attended the New Teacher Academy last week over a span of 2 days. Topics covered during these 2 days included learning about the district's instructional programs and resources, health and safety, technology tools and resources, pupil services and special education, as well as participating in a bus tour of all 7 schools in the district. Each new teacher was also paired with a mentor in a collaborative professional relationship centered around the school's culture, resources, and routines that will support them as they begin their career here at Methacton. Please turn around, if you may, to the screen and enjoy this video of the class of 2024-25 induction.
Hello, my name is David Atkins. I'm going to be teaching Gifted at Arcola, and I love to travel, and I almost had a minor in theater.
Hi, my name is Mackenzie McGinnis. I'm going to be teaching orchestra at Arcola, and I just recently got married.
Hi, I'm Tina Luciani. I'm going to be teaching K-2 learning support at Woodland, and I have a dog and a bunny, and they're both my favorite thing in the whole world.
My name is Lauren Banaka, and I'm going to be teaching health and phys ed at Eagleville and Worcester. I enjoy running, and my favorite movie is The Blind Side.
Hi, I'm Cindy Lee. I'm going to be at Arrowhead as an inclusion support facilitator. This is my 19th year teaching, and I moved here all the way from Chicago. I'm really excited to get to know everybody. One thing about me is my favorite author is J.R.R. Tolkien, so I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, and hopefully I'll find some other Lord of the Rings nerds out here too.
Hi, my name is Kylie Torrens. I'm going to be a second grade teacher at Worcester Elementary. I'm super excited. And one thing about me is I really love to travel, and my favorite has been going to Wyoming.
Hi, my name is Sarah Johns, and I'm going to be the new school counselor at Methacton High School. This is actually going to be my first year as a school counselor, so I'm excited to get to know everyone in the community. And one thing that I love to do is I love to roller skate. So I'm happy to meet some other people in the community who also like to go to the local rinks.
Hi, my name is Gabby Shirey. I will be at Arcola Intermediate School, and I will be the 8th grade learning support teacher. I am a recent Methacton grad, and I'm really excited to be back home at my alma mater. One thing about me is me and my kids went to Disney World for the very first time this summer, and we had a blast.
My name is Aline Stafford. I'll be teaching social studies at the high school. I am a retired teacher. I retired in 2022 from Cheltenham School District.
Hi, my name is Lauren McDonald. I will be teaching at Arcola for 7th grade learning support, and I actually graduated from Methacton in 2020.
Hi, my name is Gavin Giza, and I will be teaching at Woodland for the K-2 low incidence. I am one of 7 children.
Hi, I'm Gianna Marchese. I will be teaching at Arcola for 7th grade English. And a fun fact about me is I also know sign language.
Hi, I'm Lynn Pouts. I'll be at Skyview this year, Galaxy Team, teaching 5th grade science and social studies. And I absolutely love gardening and have my own plant business.
Hi, my name is Casey Robinson. I will be teaching at Worcester Elementary School for special education. And a fun fact about me is that I've read all the Harry Potter books. I probably know all the words to them, and I'm a big Harry Potter fan.
Hi, my name is Sierra Wisniewski. I'm the long-term sub for 2nd grade at Eagleville. And a fun fact about me is I have 5 dogs.
Hi, my name is Kayla Lowe, and I'll be teaching 4th grade at Eagleville this year. A fun fact about me is I grew up playing softball, and for the past few summers, I've helped coach my younger sister's softball team.
Hi, I'm Rhiannon Serpico. I'm a school nurse at Arcola. Fun fact about me, when I'm not at work, my kids and I are at the beach reading books.
Hi, my name is Laura White. I'm on the STARS team at Skyview, 5th grade ELA. And the fun fact about me is that I have 3 kids and we just adopted a puppy this week.
Hi, my name's Austin Lightham. I'll be teaching 8th grade mathematics at Arcola Intermediate School. And an interesting fact about me, I'm a huge Eagles fan.
Hi, I'm Wes Johnson. I'll be doing 6th grade learning support at Skyview, and I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, born and raised outside of Philadelphia.
My name is Greg Jascott, and I'll be teaching art at the high school. And my fun fact is that I'm a graduate of Methacton from 1999.
And that is our class of 2024-25. We want to welcome them as they start their careers within Methacton. With that, the next presentation is the Methacton High School Campus Planning Budget Impact Analysis. The board will just give me a few minutes to place at the podium. So good evening. As determined back in March 26th of 2024, the board directed the administration to bring forward 3 concepts for new school construction. And in doing that, we scheduled a meeting that was held last week where those concepts were delivered along with the cost. And this evening is a follow-up presentation to those concepts to provide a general overview of how new construction would impact the budget and possibly taxpayers into the future. So a few of these slides are going to be read word for word just to make sure that we're clear on what tonight's presentation is and what it isn't. And then some of them actually speak for themselves, and we want to make sure that you as board members know that the presentation is printed out for your review. This will then be posted to the district website under the board presentation area, as well as on the Methacton High School Campus Planning website. So this presentation is designed to provide a summary of discussion points leading to the current state of Methacton High School campus planning process. So some of this information many of you have already heard before, but maybe some of you have not. And I want to make sure that we understand the context of why we're having this conversation today. Secondly, the presentation is designed to provide a reasonable notice of the district's ability to borrow $100 million or $200 million for capital improvement projects. The presentation is designed as a model to model potential impact on the budget and taxpayers of the borrowing of $100 million, which generally in this presentation is associated with a high school renovation, or $200 million, which is generally associated with the cost of new high school construction. The information contained within will likely change over time as the planning process continues forward. There are no board actions required from this presentation at this time, and the information is not final determination of the cost for renovations or for new construction or for future budget years. This slide depicts the prominent structures on the high school campus, which have all been part of the larger discussion for the past 2 years. Slide 4, the 2023 facilities assessment with conditions report indicate that 3 of the prominent structures combined will require approximately $70 million in improvements in the next 5 years. On slide 5, as such, prior to making any further investments into the campus structures, it is imperative that we develop a comprehensive campus plan that considers the educational, operational, and financial context to ensure that the future investments support the mission of the district and the vision of our high school campus for the next 50 years. On slide 6, In February of 2024, following feedback from the 140-member Methacton High School Campus Planning Committee that included students, parents, staff, and community members, our owner's representative provided several high-level pre-conceptual scenarios for the board's consideration, and they include option 1, an in-place renovation that would estimated to range from $95 to $99 million. Option 2, a renovation plus auditorium and natatorium additions from 112 to 118 million. Option 3, renovations plus auditorium, natatorium, and classroom additions from 148 million to 156 million. And option 4, which had option 4A and 4B based on square footage, between 175 million and 205 million. On slide 7, these options were paired with the 140-member High School Campus Planning Committee priorities as listed on the left column, and how each option is able to meet, not to meet at all, partially meet, or completely meet the recommendations. As you can see, option 1, coming in at about $100 million, will at best partially address 4 of the 11 priorities, whereas option 4, in the $200 million range, will be able to address all of the priorities. Slide 8. Given the March 26, 2024 approval of the motion, it included engaging the board-approved architect, owner's rep, and solicitor, providing no less than 3 concept designs with estimated cost timelines and impact for a new high school. Priorities, or provides a public input on concept designs, and provides recommendations and feedback to be presented at a special meeting in the future. Slide 9. The 3 concepts were presented at the Board of School Directors work session meeting on August 20th, with the presentation being posted to the presentation section of the campus planning website. This slide depicts the schedule of feedback with a planned determination by the board on how and if to proceed forward on new school construction on or about October 9th or no later than October 29th, as listed on this slide. In terms of slide 10, in summary, given the assessment studies and the recommendations from the High School Campus Planning Committee, the 4 preconceptual options, the decision to investigate new construction further, and the presentation of concepts, preliminary cost projections, and our quest to gather additional feedback, I present to you a reasonable notice of the district's ability to borrow $100 million for renovations or $200 million for new construction. On slide 11, the Methacton School District, as summarily defined through these demographics, slide 12, is seeing local investments planned for the near future. This is a sign of growth, both in interest of people living in our community and attending our schools, as well as growth of future revenue. Slide 13. Student enrollment has remained flat and is projected to remain flat well into the future. On slide 14, this slide depicts the district is proactive in developing a master facilities plan to address current and future facility needs. Slide 15. The district has historically remained below the Act 1 index. The Act 1 index is the percent by which a school district can increase taxes from year to year. Slide 16. The slide illustrates that the district has generally issued tax increases below the rate of inflation. On slide 17. In summary, these data points, along with the district's historical audited financials, place the Methacton School District in a strong financial position, one that will allow us to pursue major capital investments if we so choose to proceed forward. In the next several slides, I will be providing information from a budget model and how borrowing for renovation or borrowing for new construction or for $100 million or $200 million can impact the budget, taxes, and taxpayers. Slide 18. For some background, the budget model uses some of these assumptions for revenue, and on slide 19, these assumptions for the expenditures. On slide 20, the first model shows the next 4 years, including borrowing a new $100 million for renovation. So as a basic principle to this model, the 4 years following a decision to borrow for renovation or for new construction, such as borrowing $100 million or borrowing $200 million, requires the district to phase into our budget the interest and principal cost. Please note that we do not borrow all the funds at one time. So we do not take out, we don't do a borrowing of 100 million, or we don't do a borrowing of 200 million at one time. It is phased in. Typically, we would borrow 3 to 5 times during the period just before construction would begin and during construction. The budget, therefore, will need to reach a consistent level of interest and principal cost in the budget. We commonly refer to this as the run rate. The model that I'm presenting is designed to keep all revenue and expenditure assumptions consistent, with the differences being between the $100 million borrowing and the $200 million borrowing. So, on this slide, you will see that the 5-year budget projection, including the current year, you see that for the next 4 consecutive years with a $100 million borrowing, we would see the projected tax increases as listed at the bottom of each year. So as you see for 26, 27, you'll see 3.13. For 28, 29, you see 1.79 as an example. On the next slide, slide 21. This 5-year budget projection is adding $200 million to the borrowing. And we are seeing tax increases as listed here, 2.6, 4.2, 4.4. On slide 22, this slide, along with slide 23, shows the 10-year model for the budget with $100 million borrowing, with a run rate being achieved by 2028, as listed in the red, with the red arrow for that year. On slide 23, this is the 10-year representation with the borrowing of $200 million, which will take an additional year to reach the run rate if, in fact, those are the tax increases and the budgets for those years. On slide 24, this slide, along with the next several, are designed to illustrate the impact of the property owners given the assessed property value and the differential of the property taxes on the budget between $100 million as compared to $200 million borrowing. So on this slide, if you look at the $100 million borrowing on average, you will see that so for example, on slide 25, you'll see that approximately for $100 million borrowing, we will see $134 increase in taxes for the 25-26 school year. On slide 26, you will see that for a $200 million borrowing, given the same assumptions, you would see a tax increase of about $157 on the $200 million borrowing. On slide 27, the difference in the tax in this year between the 100 and 200 is approximately $23. The difference of $23 is the choice between renovating the high school with $100 million and new construction at $200 million. It is also could be looked at as the difference between partially addressing 4 of the 11 priorities as compared to 11 of the priorities in the new construction option. And as we go on to the next slide, slide 28, 29, and 30, it gives you additional examples of how the differential between the $100 million borrowing and the $200 million borrowing will have an impact on the taxpayer. So in the next year, it would have been $45. In the following year, it would have been $185. And as shared previously, once the budget reaches its target run rate, that tax increases will level off and be more consistent with our general operating trends, as seen in previous slides. In slide 31, this simply summarizes the tax increase projections as modeled, along with the modeling the future tax increases with no additional borrowing in the near future. While we're providing this representation of no additional borrowing, it is unlikely, given the master facilities plan, that we will not, that there won't be a future where we will not be borrowing. On slide 32, I think it's fair for us to talk about some of the future considerations, and those including staffing costs are predicted to rise faster than normal due to scarcity and availability of workers. Special education costs will need to be contained specifically with third-party contractors. Transportation costs are locked in for 4 more years, but driver scarcity, fuel costs, and other demand and trend in electrified vehicles could play a future impact on the operating budget. Student enrollment is predicted to remain stable for the next 10 years, and the economy will dictate the EIT and interest rates, and will dictate the costs associated with PSERS and utilities, goods, services, all having an impact in the Act 1 index. On slide 33, and this is really the summary of all the work that we've done in order to recognize our current position with borrowing 100 or borrowing $200 million. I can stand before you this evening and let you know that Methacton School District's future budget projections with $200 million borrowing reasonably provides for all of the following: continued focus on student performance, program development, exceptional educational experience, academic excellence. We will be able to continue the focus on and recruiting and retaining and developing employees. And we will continue to focus on addressing facilities needs, including construction of a new high school campus. Methacton School District has the capacity to borrow $200 million without requiring referendum. The capital borrowing will be required regardless of a path forward, whether it's new construction or renovation, and will have an impact on the annual budget and taxpayers. Borrowing $100 million for renovation will require tax increases close to the Act 1 index in 2 of the 4 projected years, while as borrowing $200 million for new construction will likely require increases close to or at the Act 1 index for 4 of the years to reach the budget run rate. And it is estimated that the average assessed property will see between $22.96 in year 1 and $185 in year 4, a differential between $100 million and $200 million in borrowing for the budget to reach its run rate. And let me just be clear that, once we reach the run rate, that doesn't mean that the cost of paying for the borrowing of 100 or paying for the borrowing of 200 ends at that particular point. It just means that the large jumps in tax increases and the ability to get to the, I'll call it, level and consistent funding will cease, and that will. I got one more slide, and so I think it's also important for the board to recognize that on the second to last slide that there is additional planning required, and with that it is important for us to develop a comprehensive capital borrowing strategy. I've just given you a high level of what it looks like if we were to borrow $100 million or $200 million. Certainly we would need to work with our finance committee and our financial advisors to leverage how this will work in terms of timing, will work in terms of the ability to leverage the capital projects fund, as well as to make certain that we're addressing all the other facility needs within the district. So it may require us to revisit the master facilities plan, look at the term, sequence, and scope of those projects. It may also require us to determine that we need to seek other operational cost savings in terms of the renovation and new construction. So there's generally a cost savings to the operation of a new building, approximately 30%, when we look at going from a current state of operations to a new constructed building. We certainly need to continue our stringent review of the annual budgetary cost and seek alternative revenue resources. And as this schedule had been laid before you, gather and consider feedback from the public. With that, I open the floor to any questions from members of the board. Mr. Winters?
Yeah. So just for clarification on slide 22 and 23, you talk about establishing to a new run rate related to borrowing of 100 million versus 200 million. Can you explain the difference in the years 5 beyond, where you have 1.8 to 3.08 and then 1.8 to 4.09?
Yeah. So so the first four years are calculated basically using our standard 5-year projection modeling tool. After that, we've used the average. The 1.8 average is the average that we've had for the last, I believe, 10 years. So I took the last 10 years, said here's the average percent tax increase that we've incurred, and then I also took the average of the 5 years that we are using in the projection. So I wanted to make sure that while it's hard for us to predict what the tax increases will be in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, likely even going out any further than that, I wanted the board to recognize that we've typically been, and this slide kind of indicates that. I'm just going to go back to this. I believe it's slide 15. It clearly indicates that we've been below the Act 1 index for almost entirely the last 10 years. With that, the assumption is that we can continue that level of scrutiny and provide that consistency going forward. Again, it's a range. I can't predict the way the economy will be in those particular years, and that's why I'm making those calculations. So it's just I'll call it a range between what it is that we can predict.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the difference in the back end number. So you have two different numbers. You have 1.8 to 3.08, and then 1.8
yeah,
to 4.08.
I think the 3.08 is based on the 5 years for 100 million, and then the 4.9 is the 5 years for the 200 million.
Yeah, but I guess I'm trying to understand, Dave, is that you said that we establish ourselves in 2030 to a new run rate. So when the run rate be already established related to the debt, and then the only thing not the only thing, but the change in the tax increases from years 2030 and beyond would be related to operational choices and not to
that's correct, and that's what that's trying to demonstrate. So our operational budget has been on average between 1.8 and I'm estimating that it could be up to 3, given the previous 5 years. Okay. So it's not based on new debt. It's based on on an assumption that we will not be taking on any new debt beyond the 100 or the 200, and that it'll be operational cost only.
Okay, let me ask a different question. So I think it's really important on slide 34 to talk about, this gives us a directional, and it's not the be all end all of a financial analysis, but I think it's some of the things that you discuss here on this slide, I think need to be pointed out, because we do see the 4 point whatever for the 200 million for 4 years, and 3 of the 4 years, a 4 point something for each of those years. I can give exact numbers so people that don't have the presentation in front of them. So the next 4 years were 2.6 in the $200 million alternative. It's 2.6, 4.42, 4.2, 4.49. So 3 of the 4 years are in the 4s. And it determines the risks associated with the Act 1 assumptions. So one of the biggest concerns that I have related to this, I understand that we have to make the assumptions, is that good news is the Act 1 index might not be at 5%, but that the bad news is we would be bumping against or not even being able to use that level of tax at that particular point in time. So I think we need to, as you're pointing out here, is that there are a lot of other risks on the assumptions that we need to model out. And your points about using the capital projects fund, about how to use that, understanding that there would be interim interest income associated with borrowing $45 million at a particular time. There's lots of variables in here. So it is not an exact science. We're not in that time frame for the exact science at this particular point. But from a directional, if I summarize what you said here, is it doesn't mean we have to, but the mathematics of it indicate that we could borrow $200 million reasonably with tax increases that are difficult for the community to take on. But the mathematics are there without affecting our operational budget, meaning we won't have to make choices about laying off teachers or cutting programs or dropping anything. All those standard operational activities are still solidly paid for along this projection balance, and the borrowing that's added to it is related to the facilities requirements that we have. Is that a good summary?
That is a good summary, and it's really, if you look at slide, I believe it's 33, that's what I tried to convey in the first several bullets, that we can take on a $200 million borrowing and still meet the obligations of the district in terms of our directional for student performance, program development, recruiting and retaining staff, as well as focusing on other facilities.
And I think it's important to say, I'm just trying to make sure that people understand that these are hard choices to make. This is a lot of money to borrow. These are large tax increases, but the purpose of this presentation, in my opinion, was to give the board and the community an understanding if the capability is even there, right?
Yeah,
So,
Mr. Winters, I think it's important that if I was showing you that we would have to take on tax increases of 6-7%, we probably would have a different conversation here today. And the simple fact that we are in the range of tax increases that we've taken on recently, as well as ones that are not far from what we've taken on recently, knowing that there are ways to best manage through a borrowing process. I think we're in a healthy position, not only financially, but in our total borrowing capacity. As we're taking on new debt, you'll hear from PFM in the future if we continue to pursue this. They'll explain to you that some of the debt that we currently have will be falling off and allow us to meet this run rate even a lot quicker. And that's really the challenge here. The challenge is getting from approximately, I'll say, $9 million of a run rate today back up to approximately $15 million of a run rate that would be required in order to manage the interest and principal associated with the borrowing of $200 million. And that's what happens over the next 4 years beyond this process. Ms. Cleary?
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. On slide 33, you state that the school district has the capacity to borrow $200 million without requiring referendum. What is the number that would require referendum?
Well, I think there's going to be there's two things. There's several things in the referendum. So you will see, if you look back at the PFM report, there was an indication based on, I believe it's the previous 3 years of your budget revenue, calculated at, I believe, 225%. And if I may be mistaken, I don't have the figures in front of me. But what it talks about is, I think about a year or possibly 2 years ago, we were at, I believe, an additional borrowing of $201 million about 2 years ago. So I don't have the number for us for going forward, and I certainly can get that.
I apologize if that's
No,
a
but
question
the,
you weren't.
but the second
expecting,
thing,
but
no, it's okay. The second thing is our ability to manage the budget and not be able to go over the Act 1 index for managing the borrowing of 20 million. So that could require a referendum as well.
Okay, but on the first point, I would, if we could, if you could let the board know what that number is. I just, for my own purposes of putting all of this in context, I would like to know what that number is. And then the other question I had is on.
And if I could, Ms. Claire,
Please, yeah.
just kind of, let's say, for example, the amount is 201 based on the calculations from 2 years ago. The understanding is that every year you're going to have you're increasing your budget. So and at the same time, you're also reducing debt. So there's a dynamic where it's not, if we want to borrow 200 and you're saying a year or two ago it's 201, it's more, the gap is much broader than that in terms of its borrowing. I don't want to give you the impression here this evening that it's a close gap, because it won't be by the time you phase in the borrowing, and by the time you have 4 or 5 budget years, and by the time you pay off some of the previous debt. That gap becomes a lot wider. And I think we need to model that so that you understand how that happens.
So
I don't know if that makes sense, but
well, I'm not
there's
sure.
a couple pieces to it.
So I'm not sure. So let me just sort of, from my own mind, sort of flesh that out. So are you saying the referendum number is based on what we borrow each year? If we borrowed, no. Right, that's okay. Okay, so I am confused. So it would help me to just better understand from the district what the number is at some point. Okay. And then my other question was on slide 34. You talk about additional planning required and seek alternative revenue sources. Can you expand on what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think some of the general things that we might think of, going after grants, things of that nature, but I'm thinking a little bit broader than that. I think that, how do we engage our Methacton Education Foundation in terms of, do we want to start a capital campaign that to raise funds to help create a private-public partnership as part of this endeavor? Do we want to provide opportunity for naming rights in terms of working with businesses and industry and individuals that want to leave a legacy and support some of the innovation that we're trying to bring forward? I imagine from my experience back when almost 8-9 years ago, when we had the Fields project, we raised, it pales in comparison, but we raised $1.7 million with a short run in terms of our efforts. And I think that certainly if that's something that we want to take on, and our direction is going forward with new construction, I think that's something we ought to seriously sit down and consider.
And I suppose that as we look forward and we think about other things, such as what we might do in the future with Audubon, that could potentially be another revenue source. Okay.
Certainly.
Thank you, Dr. Serby.
Yep. Thank you. Other questions? Ms. Graff?
Yeah, so against my better judgment, I'm going to ask this question because I think we need to go back for a second. On slide 6,
okay,
we talk about the preconceptual scenarios, and I'm hoping that our architect or our engineer may be able to answer this question. Option 4A and 4B were giving us a low end and a high end based on square footage at 308,000 square feet. The concepts that we saw last week, where do they stack up in terms of square feet?
Good question. What is the square footage? I'm sorry? 335? 335.
Okay. So the design then, the concept designs that we've seen are already pushing us into that higher end of the range. And that estimate was coming at us in March.
Correct.
So in 6 months, we've moved
I think
beyond
the
that
estimate
a
came
little
in
bit.
February, just to be clear.
So 6 months though.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's February.
The second question I have is a little bit more simple, I think. If you go to slide 20, This is the budget projections for 5 years if we borrowed $100 million. At the bottom, we see the increase in tax rates for the $100 million borrowing. Those increases include not only the borrowing amount, but also what you're considering to be normal increases in operating expenses year on year.
Yeah, so just to be clear, I have an abbreviated slide of expenditure assumptions on, I believe, slide 19, an abbreviated slide of revenue assumptions that are built into that model that you're referring to on slide 20.
And that's great. I'm just trying to clarify it for general population to be able to say, does this make sense? You're basically making an assumption that our operating expenses will increase in a similar fashion to the increases we've seen in the past 10 years.
I am, yes.
And then can you tell me for the $100 million capital borrowing, what the increase in taxes will be at the end of 2029? So over this 5-year span, what's the total?
I don't know if I have that number.
So I think that information needs to get added in here.
Okay.
I just think that if I'm asking that question myself, sitting here thinking, okay, so we said it's 2.2%, 3.1%. How much does that actually come out of my pocket? And I think the same is true on slide 21, where we should actually add a row at the bottom that includes the amount that the 2.6% increase in taxes equates to. Now, the other thing I would say is that in doing that, we're not able to segment the amount that we're going to increase taxes if we borrow $200 million versus the amount that taxes would increase anyway from normal potential increases in spending or budgetary costs. So I just wonder if there's a benefit for us to break it out to say, okay, so if the tax increase, round numbers, goes up $100 over this 5-year span, is $20 of that $100 accounted to normal budgetary increases, or is $50 attributable to normal budgetary increases? And then conversely, how much of that $100 increase is attributable to the new high school construction project? I think that's an important decision as the board is trying to decide if we can afford, if the taxpayers can afford this. We need to know what the actual impact to them is going to be.
I understand what you're asking. And are you thinking that we take it out till we reach the run rate, or do we?
You're going to borrow, in this scenario, we're borrowing over a 5-year period. So that 5-year period is where you're going to see the increase in taxes because of the borrowing.
We'll see the jumps, correct?
Right. After you get to the end, the taxes are essentially level off and they stay where they were unless you borrow more money.
Correct.
So we wouldn't see an increase after that. So to me, I think that's the run rate. When you talk about run rate, I think of it as like the tax increase rate. What is the increase in dollars every year for this much borrowing? And does that make sense for the district and for the taxpayers?
Yeah, I understand exactly what you're asking, and that does make sense. And I'll see if we can put that together into the slide.
And then I just had a question.
I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt. I wanted to just get a clarifier on that concept. Do you mind if I ask you that? Isn't that is it basically taking these costs and placing it under there? So I'm saying under that 26.
Actually, no, it's not.
All right, then we'll definitely putting it underneath. All right, thank you.
So
because what you're referring to, Ms. Cancro, is the total tax for those, the impact for that year. And she's asking what's of the $23 in the first, I'm sorry, of the, I don't have the slide in front of me.
So for example, in slide 24.
As of the $134, how much of that is actually for the borrowing of $100 million? Let's say it's $10. I don't know, but that's what I think she's asking. Is that correct, Ms. Graff?
That's right.
Okay.
I just want to break it out because there's a lot of assumptions on the operating expense side that we can remove from the equation. To Paul's point, they're all valid assumptions, we think, but we could remove them from the discussion altogether by just saying, here's what the borrowing cost is. And then we're just talking about the impact of the borrowing, not all these other assumptions. It simplifies the conversation, I think.
And I agree with you on that. I just thought the approach taking it here is I just didn't want, in previous slides that we presented back in the preconceptual phase of things back in January, February, we were focusing in only on the actual costs associated with the borrowing. And that also is absent of this part. So I think if we put them both together, it gives everybody a clear picture, like here's the maximum of what taxes will look like in the future, including the operation, and here's what the actual increase is attributed to the new borrowing.
Right.
And it allows us to make a better decision. So I understand exactly what you're asking.
And then the other question I had, I heard you, if I heard you correctly, you said you're providing the board with reasonable notice. Is that a technical term? And I guess I saw it in one of the slides.
I think I wanted to let you know that, again, with all the other, I'll call them considerations that we need to put in place. I mean, I only took into account the assumptions that I can. I mean, I think it's just reasonable to take the assumptions, the models that we've made assumptions on for the budget process for the longest time. So that's what I meant by that. When I say reasonable, I'm thinking like I've used I can't predict what the interest rates are going to be in borrowing. I can't predict if we are going to, earn $4 million in a $200 million borrowing, and we're going to be able to only borrow $196 million versus $200 million. Like there's a lot of variables in this, and we won't really know where we're at on this definitively until we get closer to those decision points. Not only with the cost of what construction would look like if we went down that path, but also what the interest rates and the market is and the economic environment is. But the good news, and what I'm trying to share with you this evening, is that the current model is, in my opinion, is very conservative. So I was on the high end of contract with the staffing contracts. So I'm unnecessarily providing those percentages here for you, but I want you to know that this is very conservative. In my opinion, it's the worst case scenario of the $200 million borrowing. And that's why I wanted to make sure that when I said earlier, if I was going to present to you a 6, 7, 8% potential tax increase, I don't know how to manage through that. I wouldn't know how to tell you this is where we would be able to borrow $200 million with a projected 6, 7, 8% tax increase. But we're talking about tax increases that are modeled conservatively to on the $200 million that I believe with the use of the capital projects reserves, as well as with our financing team, be able to provide a reasonable approach forward, knowing what we know today, to borrow the $200 million without overburdening the taxpayers, and possibly reduce those levels there that I had shared. I don't think they'll be greater than that. Is what I'm trying to get at.
Right, I understand. My last question is for the 24-25 on the 5-year budget projection slides on page 20 and 21. For 24-25, we included some borrowing. Do you remember how much that amount of borrowing was in our current budget?
For the current budget, I believe it was $1.2 million.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Alston?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Zerbe. I just had a question, just because I know we look at it regularly, but the facilities plan, as it kind of matches up with this 5-year, are there any items in the facilities plan that also are big ticket items that would include more borrowing that could, or I guess, is that assumption already worked into this?
So I want to be clear on the master facilities plan, and I'm just going to go to that slide if I could real quick. So we're all speaking from the same spot. The master facilities plan currently has a projected $221 million estimated facilities renovation cost that includes the high school. If you take out the high school, I believe there are $69 million worth of other projects that are slated within that 10-year time frame. What I'm proposing is, as part of the additional work, it was like the second to last slide, was that we need to revisit the master facilities plan to make certain that if we were to consider borrowing $200 million for the high school, that we would likely, from a position of affordability as well as manageability, likely need to push our other projects down the road a little bit. And what I want to be able to do is, share with the board that, hey, this is how we would do that. These are the things that we would need to consider. And so you're absolutely right. We will need to look at the term, sequence, and scope, and the costs, the estimated costs associated with those projects, so that we better have a long view of all of our facility needs, not just a $200 million borrowing.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is
And
about.
if I could, I'm sorry,
Oh, yeah,
I didn't
go
mean to
ahead.
interrupt, but I think what's important to that is the types of borrowing that are in that master facilities plan aren't to the level that we're talking about here. So that means that we're talking about a borrowing of $2 million or $3 million or $4 million at certain times, and those things aren't as impactful in terms of a run rate for the budget and so forth. So I just wanted
And that was rather the crux of my question.
Yeah. So we're not going to borrow another $69 million at another time. We're talking about probably extending this out for 15 years. So we're talking about over 15 years having some a play in that particular set of projects.
Okay, thank you. And then the next question has to do, it's not really a question, but it's really just more of maybe a concern about the assumptions in the 5-year budget projection, because running that, if you're looking at the salary and then it would be the associated benefits, it looks like the assumptions are 4%, 3%, 3.7, 3.7 for those salaries. So I just, also in conjunction with the slide that talks about the staffing challenges in the future, also with the idea that our special ed costs have outpaced and we've, have been allowed the exceptions, the Act 1 of the Act 1 index. I just, I don't know if those are, you have to have an assumption, of course, but it just gives me some pause to, knowing what's ahead of us with staffing shortages and rising special ed costs, just to make sure that those assumptions are in fact, because it said that they were based on trend, and I just don't know that the past trend is going to be equal to the future trends.
Yeah, that's a fair statement, and certainly the best my best approach to sharing with you without giving you the actual percentages, and certainly the challenge is making sure that we consider the increases in the professional staff and the support staff, administrative staff, knowing that those increases are going to be likely greater in the future. And so based on the current contract, they are greater than, I put them in greater in the model than what they were likely to occur, if that makes sense. So they, when I say they're conservative, they're higher than what we've seen trending. And again, in that personnel, it's just not the salaries, and there's other, I'll call personnel costs that are associated with that as well. Ms. Cancro?
No, thank you I appreciate everybody's input on this. And I do like the 5-year budget projection. I did the same thing. I did what I would like us to do as a group is looking at the additional planning that's required this next month, I'd ask each of our committee members to break down, like in our property, to really, can we review the master plan and making sure we look at those sequences and the terms and make sure we're looking at that, and seeing what it is that's going on and kind of reporting back to the board just to make sure. And I do think in our finance, I think it's important that we revisit the capital borrowing and seeing if we could reach out to PFM and discuss in the finance committee the borrowing strategy opportunities, because I do think we did discuss there's different levels of times to borrow, whatever we decide to do. But interest income is a crucial thing that we could benefit from, in my opinion, right now. If we did have to borrow, whatever scenario we did take, and then borrow later on. So being able to do that, and then reviewing again our capital reserve, and seeing what's there and what we have as our capital fund, just to make sure. And then I do think we need the education committee to look at the special ed and the numbers and the increases that have occurred. So I do think each of our committees should take some of these and look at this again, just to make sure we do know where our bandwidth is. I know with contracts, like being able to report back to the board, their familiarity of the contracts, because I've sat in all the contracts. And I do know like what years we're in and what they are, and sharing that information would be crucial for them, so they do see. And I do think your projections for the 5-year were nice and expansive, so I do appreciate that. So that's what I think we really need to do, is take this time in September to work on those specifics as a group, and then come back and know where our comfort is. But thank you for this. I do like the comparisons of each scenarios, and seeing where our bandwidth is and what we're asking the community to be committed to. And so I do ask that we keep that email open, send out another email to the community of feedback, because it should be a rolling feedback, even on this financial feedback. So thank you.
Yeah. So with that, Ms. Cancro, on the slide that had all the scheduled meetings, certainly we'll be having not only a presentation on the concepts, but also, a discussion about the finances and the impact. So we'll be prepared for those meetings, and they're coming up, I believe, sometime next week. Any other questions from members of the board at this time? Mr. Mursky?
Yeah, I did have a couple questions. So on slide 22 and 23, what's the total local effort represent?
So the total local effort, this was a chart given to us by PFM that says if we put all your debt into all your debt into a bucket, this is what the district would need to pay in terms of.
So this is annual debt expense per year for those years, the years listed.
Correct.
And the subsequent tax to support it.
Yep.
And the tax, in the tax column, projected tax column, the in years 5 through 13, you have 1.8 to 3.8 for the 100 million, and 1.8 to 4.09 for the 200 million.
Right.
But that 1.8 is basically the base inflation rate.
Correct.
Right. So that's really not relevant to the debt service.
Well, I think the 1.8 is if we look at.
It's not as though the debt service is going to vary from 1.8 to 3.08.
Correct.
It's going to be.
This is the annual operating expenses increases that we'd see.
Right.
Therefore, it has
Which
nothing
are
to
on
do
the
with
previous
moving in the run rate. But it is inclusive of the overall tax and the budget burden, I would call it.
So the essential difference is that you get to an annual tax burden rate, debt service rate of 925, almost 10 million, and it starts decreasing to 8.5. Okay, for the 100 million.
Mm-hmm.
For the 200 million, you get to 15 million annual debt service, and it flattens out. Now, I'm assuming that because it's just both 30-year notes, the 200 million doesn't start to tail off until towards the end. First of all, but there's space. The first point is there's a $5.5 million debt service difference between the two scenarios once you get to the run rate.
That's correct.
Correct. Which represents roughly a 1% tax difference in tax burden once you get to the runway.
Correct.
So that's the difference. And then my calculation was that in the ramp up period, there's roughly a 1.26% difference between the $100,000 and the $200,000 borrowing, because you have to ramp up faster, right? So it's not as though there's a 5% difference. There's a marginal difference to get. But the big difference is the debt service to go to do the 200 is $5.5 million, and it projects out longer than it's represented here. So I would be interested also in that. I know it was in the financial presentation from the
we can
bond
provide the whole
service, right?
we can
But
provide the whole scenario. Yeah, this is
the other
just
point is that on your slide 20 and 21, your assumed tax increase under these scenarios includes the inflation rate. Did you use the 1.8 that you referenced in the other slides for the underlying assumed operational cost increase for those scenarios? So look at slide 20 and 21.
I think if you look at, I'm going to get you to the slide. If you look at this slide, it's slide, I think it says 30. I can't see it. It's whatever slide it says, 31.
Yeah, it says 31.
Up at the top, if we do no additional borrowing, capital borrowing, those would be the other assumptions.
So that's the underlying assumed inflationary rate, operational budget inflationary
That's
rate
correct.
that you used, not the
Yes.
average. Okay. No, because to Kate's point, I knew, I mean, the number is buried in here, what the assumed non-borrowing portion of the debt, of the operational increase.
Right.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Again, we'll be, with the team of the Shader Group and Dewey CHA, we'll be hitting the auditorium at the high school for a number of public forums for the next several weeks. We will be providing feedback from those forums to the board on a regular basis. So we look to that. We also welcome anybody from the public as well as members of the board to attend those meetings as they see fit. So with that said, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Zerbe. We will now move to reports. At this time, we do not have, since it's beginning of the new school year, we do not have DEI, MCIU, North Monco Technical Center, but we do have the foundation. So Ms. Pergolini, thank you for joining us and welcome back.
Good evening. As we embark on another school year, we had lots of first day signs printed and shared on social media. We're very excited. And last year, our efforts resulted in over $225,000 to the Methacton School District, and we can't wait to help you guys out again this year. Now, new this year, we're excited to announce that we have some new directors. We welcome Seema Rafad, Bill DeLong, and district staff members, Miss Barbie Griffith, Miss Yvonne Eglinton, and Miss Stephanie Cohen. So they'll all be on our board this year. And we want to thank Matt Alsmore and Brian Hoffman for their invaluable contributions during their time on the board. Matt was a great teacher liaison, and we know he'll also still be helpful at plenty of things at the high school. And next, please join us for the Race Back to School Methacton 5K Run and Walk on Sunday, September 15th at Huebner Park. All proceeds will benefit the backpack program. You can sign up at methactonfoundation.org/5K. And lastly, do you know an exceptional Methacton educator, staff member, alumni, or community member who deserves recognition for their accomplishments? The Education Foundation is seeking nominations for the 2024 Apex Awards. This prestigious awards honors teachers, alumni, community members who have made extraordinary impact on our school district. You can nominate them at methactonfoundation.org/apex. The Apex Awards will be held on November 14th at the new facility at the Jeffersonville Golf Club. That's all I have, and welcome back to everybody.
Great, thank you so much. I look forward to the back to school race. I think many of our board members are going to be involved in supporting you. Thank you. I will now move to the superintendent's report. Dr. Zerby.
Thank you, Madam President. As you can see, there are a number of advisements and also the monthly right to know report that are on there. But I also would like to say thank you to all of our support and administrative staff for preparing for an awesome start to the school year, and certainly want to welcome back our 10-month support staff as well as our teachers. We're off to a great start. Thank you to the Transportation Department, Food Service Department. All of those efforts today were brought together to make a great start to the school year. That ends my report.
Great. I'm very glad to hear that. We will now move to public comment on board action items. The board will now take comments on board action items. This is an opportunity for residents to comment on matters that are to be decided upon as outlined on the agenda. The board asks that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. The Board of School Directors may choose to respond to matters following the conclusion of the comments on board action items.
Hi, Brian Earnshaw, Lower Providence. 2 questions on the reelection of the assistant superintendent. Why are we doing this nearly a year early before the current contract expires? And secondly, what is the annual salary of the assistant superintendent currently? I see the salary is going to $220,000. The most recent information I found online was his current salary is $188,000, which will be a 17% increase. If you could confirm that is accurate, and if it is accurate, why is a 17% increase required with this contract renewal? Regarding the plans to build a new high school, I brought up and asked a lot of questions about
I
current.
apologize. We don't have a motion.
Right. Well, it relates to the list of bills, which includes an $81,000 payment to the Schneider Group architecture firm relating to the new high school project.
Thank you. Sorry.
So with respect to the new high school, why are we not addressing the current billing issues I've asked about many, many times before? Namely, Audubon Elementary, which has sat empty for years and years. I actually drove by the other day, and it's becoming an eyesore in the township. So let's do something with that property. When are you going to address the fact that our COLA is 60% utilized? And the new Arrowhead building that was just built is opened, it was only 70% utilized. And I don't know if we're adding capacity when you're going to build a new high school, but you've got sufficient capacity that should be addressed. As far as the budgetary number being $200 million, how is that determined that's the right number? Has anybody studied what the educational needs are of the district now and into the future at the high school level? I went through the presentation. I didn't really see anything relating to that. It sounds like $200 million is based on what the borrowing capacity is, which, by the way, I do have the definition of that. Somebody asked about that. The district can borrow its legal borrowing capacity, a formula which considers 225% of the average last 3 years of revenue less existing debt. Now, there was a comment that this number will increase as the district pays down debt, but Dr. Zerby's presentation tonight concluded that the district will always borrow, so debt will never go down. So don't look for the borrowing capacity to increase. And as far as Dr. Zerby's presentation, there was a lot lacking in that presentation. And I don't know how you can reach any conclusion. And I'll share, I'm running out of time, but I'll share more on that when I come back at courtesy of the floor. One glaring omission was the impact of that $200 million on the total debt service of the district. If you look at this current state versus borrowing, this is $180 million on the PFM presentation. It's about an $8.2 million swing in annual debt service within the next 4 years. So I'm out of time, so I'll come back later and give you some more of my concerns with the the very weak financial presentation we saw earlier.
Jim Malik, Worcester. I'm also going to talk about the Schrader Group bill. I learned at the last meeting, the Schrader Group relied upon the recommendations from the Methacton High School Planning Committee to design their building, to design a new building. Now, Dave, you know that they're not recommendations. They're big ideas because you sent an email out telling everybody that they're big ideas. They're not recommendations. They're big ideas from a biased group of people who are going to benefit from the project. 149, according to your report, people, 23 community members, 5 of those are board members, right? So it was stacked. So you got a stacked group coming up with a big idea wish list that your architects are using to build a $500 million project. $500 million, right? Because I saw your presentation too. Where's the interest cost on $200 million? My calculations are roughly 240, but I could be wrong. I've talked to people who said it could be higher. Where's that cost, right? Very disappointing too. I'm going to come back to your presentation. It was pretty bad, pretty bad. I don't know how you can let your architects go forward with you come up with a design based on a bunch of people's wishes. They're big ideas, they're wishes, right? They're not recommendations. It's not like you had a group of architects, a group of financial planners, a group of people who have designed and constructed high schools and been through the process, and then they gave a recommendation. It's a bunch of self-interested people said, you know what? I want a new high school. That's a good thing. Yeah, for $200 million, I think they think it's a great thing. So, I don't understand your rationale. If you actually presented the architect who charged us $80,000 for supposedly for what they put together of just big ideas. The other thing that gets me is those big ideas came up in a meeting that you would not allow anybody to videotape. And you in an email said that and said, anybody tries, hey, come to me immediately. What's the big problem with transparency? Why couldn't we see the deliberations? I know why. We'll get to that later. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. Seeing none, we are going to move to board meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve the July 23rd, 2024 meeting minutes as attached? Ms. Alston, may I have a second? Ms. Thiel, any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. It is 7-0. I apologize. We will now move to fiscal items. May I have a motion to approve all fiscal items as presented?
Can I ask for
Yes.
item 9A to be pulled out separately?
9A? Okay. May I have a motion to approve all fiscal items with the exception of 9A? Okay, Mr. Winters, may I have a second? Ms. Cleary, any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Okay, may I have a motion to approve fiscal items on 9A, list of bills? Okay, Ms. Thiel, may I have a second? Ms. Alston, any comments or questions?
Yeah, I'd like to respond. There were 2 questions on the list of bills. The first one are, I see cyber school bills on the agenda, on the list. Do students attend cyber school is the question, and in the summer, and the answer is no. But the law allows for the cyber school to bill over a 12-month period, and that's what this is. The second question is, there were a number of requests for pest control, and they were all on the same date. That was because we had the vendor do all the pest control spraying in all the buildings throughout the district on the same day.
Yes, Mr. Winters.
Based on the Ethics Act 65PA.CS 1103J at the public meeting on today, which is the 27th of August, on agenda item 9A, list of bills, I will abstain due to the conflict of interest under the Ethics Act. The nature of my interest is that my wife was the chaperone for the team's trip to Orlando and is receiving reimbursement for her expense.
All right. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? All right. With that, all those in favor? All those opposed? And one abstained? The motion carries 6-0. We will now move on to personnel items. All right. Dr. Sergini.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening. For the consideration of the board, there are the personnel items as presented last week at the work session, as well as the following additions. One resignation classified, Jill Margiotti, part-time attendance secretary at the high school. We thank Jill for her service to Methacton and we wish her well. One employment classified, Kelly Avery, bus assistant. We welcome Kelly to the Methacton family. One sabbatical leave, Maureen Stanko, reading specialist at Eagleville Elementary for the 24-25 school year. One supplemental contract for Amanda Vangieri, JV field hockey coach. We welcome Amanda to the Methacton family. And two employments administrator, and both candidates are joining us this evening. After a comprehensive application and interview process that involved multiple rounds of interviews, including a multitude of stakeholders across the district and an extensive screening and reference checking process, we have the following recommendations for our Arcola Intermediate School Principal, Mr. John Eworth. John Eworth has served the students and staff of Hatboro-Horsham School District for more than 20 years as a teacher of 8th grade mathematics, the mathematics curriculum coordinator, and for the past 11 years as the assistant principal with responsibility for 8th grade. As assistant principal, Mr. Eworth has supervised nearly 30 teachers and staff members, led curriculum review and professional learning community work, built the building master schedule, and coordinated assessments, including the PSSA and Keystone assessments. Mr. Eworth is a student-centered leader who articulated in the interview process his understanding of and appreciation for the unique needs of the middle-level learner and his passion for middle and intermediate school experiences. Mr. Eworth earned a Bachelor of Science degree in secondary mathematics education from Cairn University, a Master's of Education degree in Educational Administration from Gwynedd Mercy University, and he is currently in the doctoral program at Immaculata with an anticipated graduation of next year. We welcome Mr. Eworth to the Methacton family, and we look forward to his leadership at Arcola and his work to advocate for and celebrate the work and experiences of our middle-level learners and staff members. And Ms. Joelle Mensch, Supervisor of Special Education. Joelle Mensch has served students across Montgomery County as a school psychologist with the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. Prior to her time with the IU, Ms. Mensch has served as a school psychologist right here in Methacton School District and as a teacher of special education in Marple Newtown School District and in the Mount Laurel School District in New Jersey. Ms. Mensch earned a Bachelor's of Science in Education degree from Temple University, a Master of Education degree from Temple University, a Master of Science degree in Educational Specialist certification from the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, PCOM, and a supervisory certification from Drexel University. In addition to her work as a school psychologist, Ms. Mensch has also facilitated professional development for colleagues across Montgomery County, and she has served as a member of the countywide crisis response team. We welcome Ms. Mensch's return to the Methacton family, where we hope she stays for a long time to come, and we look forward to her leadership. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I'm very excited for the addition, so I wish you all the best of luck and a successful school year. Okay, so with that, may I have a motion to approve all personnel items as presented? Mr. Winters, may I have a second? Ms. Cleary, any comments or questions? Yes, Ms. Alston.
Yes, I just have a question about, well, welcome, Mr. Eworth and Ms. Mensch. I do just have a question about the moving parts, though, associated with the supervisor of special ed. And I apologize if I missed this at the work session, but I'm seeing 10H, John Conran is getting a monthly stipend, but only to September 30th, whereas the effective date is October 28th. So I was just wondering about that. And then also under other is a staffing services agreement for supervisor of special ed. So can you just help me understand all the
Certainly.
parts? Thank you.
We did have a supervisor of special ed who did move on, And we have an interim with us, and that contract is on the agenda under other. That individual, Ms. Kate Wesolowski, is from the Chester County Intermediate Unit. She will be with us until October. We are also anticipating some movement within our supervisors so that when Ms. Mensch joins us, she'll be doing so at the high school level in later October.
Okay, thank you. And the stipend, the teacher on assignment.
We also had a leave of absence for another supervisor of special ed.
Okay,
that
that's a
Mr. Conrad, that's a separate one that he has been
Okay.
covering.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you for helping me understand that.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Thiel?
I just have a quick comment. First, welcome, Mr. Eworth and Ms. Mensch. Thank you. Welcome to the district. I just want to give a quick comment only because one of the resignations is close and dear to my heart. Ms. Kirschner, who resigned from Arrowhead Elementary, had a really big impact on all three of my kids. Her smile was infectious, and I hope she knows how much she'll be missed, along with everyone else who's resigned. Thanks to them. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Winters.
Yeah, there was a question related to the assistant superintendent reelection. My understanding is its current salary is 204 for an increase of 7.84%. The comment related to why so early, I think it's very important to point out that we've answered several times related to this, but in the principle of education, when we cannot renegotiate or extend a contract any earlier than a year, that's when you could start. You certainly can make a decision to not have engaged with an employee, but what that does is puts them into limbo land for the following July. So his salary is not going to increase until next July, but it also gives him an understanding that he's got a commitment to Methacton, and Methacton's committing to him. So it is a normal standard practice to approach anybody that you want to keep in the district at that particular point in time.
Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions? All right. With that being said, we'll move on to all those in favor. All those opposed? All right. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean that. Motion carries 7-0.
Pardon me, Madam President. If I may, if we could invite Mr. Eworth and Ms. Mensch to come down and greet the board.
Please.
Thank you.
I know. I'm excited to have you back. All right. Well, welcome aboard. Welcome aboard. You will love our cola. Oh, jeez. I would. Oh, thank you. I would also just also thank again the extension for having you, Dr. Regina. I think we all as a group find you invaluable to our district, and it's a pleasure, and I'm excited for you to stay with us. And we have been gifted with a really talented administrator, so thank you for staying with us. I will now move on to curriculum and programs. There are no items under curriculum and programs this month. We'll move on to policy. There are no items under policy this month. And now we'll move on to other.
Thank you, Madam President. Gifts and donations as listed, no changes from last week, as well as no changes for transportation or for the staffing service agreements.
All right, thank you. May I have a motion to approve all the items under other as presented? Ms. Alston, may I have a second? Ms. Thiel, okay. Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Okay, the board meeting dates are listed on the agenda and posted online. Do we have any old or new business? Yes, Mr. Winters.
Dr. Zerbe, do you have an announcement related to Simon's Heart that you could share with the community?
I do. It's funny you ask. If you just give me 30 seconds, do you remember the exact date?
I believe it is Columbus Day, October 14th.
Okay, so on October 14th, the Methacton School District is fortunate enough to bring back Simon's Heart, which is an opportunity for us to have our families, members of our community, get free screening for heart-related issues. We know that there has been loss within our school community resulting from those physical challenges in the past, and we know that this, when it was done approximately 4 or 5 years ago, Mr. Winters, I think it was well received by the community. Our nurses are involved in the process, and it gives a great potential for us to catch challenges before or for people that may not be even aware that they have some physical challenges associated with their heart. So with that, we look forward to opening that up. Do you have any further comments?
No, I just highly recommend anybody that, no matter if their child is involved in sports or not, to look up Simon's Heart and understand the story of why it was started and understand the possibility of saving somebody's life and the purpose behind Simon's Heart. And I highly encourage all Methacton students that there's going to be a limited spots eventually. I don't know how many they serve on that particular day, but I highly encourage anybody to take advantage of the opportunity.
I'd like to also just extend a successful school year to all the students, especially the students, the teachers, the staff, the administration. So good luck. I wish you all the best this year, and I know great things are going to happen. So we will now move to courtesy of the floor. The Board of School Directors will now provide an opportunity for residents to make comment on matters that are or may be before the board. The board asks that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. The Board of School Directors may choose to respond to matters following the conclusion of the comments, and you can submit questions via email to information@methacton.org.
Brian Earnshaw, Lower Providence. Mr. Winters, thanks for answering my questions. That makes sense, and congrats, Shay. One quick question before I forget. With the open public forums coming up about the plan to build a new high school, will there be opportunity for public comment and questions? If you could let me know that, I appreciate it. What I started talking about earlier was, with this plan to build a new high school, you got to make sure you understand how you're going to mortgage the future of this district. The PFM plan from January, I believe, shows the debt service with $180 million of additional borrowing. The current debt service of $9.4 million will decrease to $5.6 million in 4 short years. If you borrow $180 million additional money, that debt service will go up by $2.6 million, which is an $8.2 million swing. So think about, within 4 years, there will be an additional $8.2 million if you didn't borrow any more money. So if you just borrowed half of the 180 and did the renovation, you'd be saving $4.1 million you could use to invest in educational programs, improve the ratings and rankings of the district, improve test scores, and give our students in the district a better future. But instead, you're looking at leverage this district significantly. You won't have any money for competitive salaries, and you won't be able to control taxes. You're running towards the vote on a path forward on October 9th. Way too quick, especially seeing that financial presentation. You cannot conclude anything from that presentation. It was skinny, lacking in detail, lacking in assumptions, and quite frankly, I was shocked that you're planning on spending $200 million and that's the financial presentation. I would advocate for hiring an outside firm, independent, to come in and review the district's finances and do a real projection before you add $450 million in debt service to the taxpayers. A big risk is, what if Act 1 is below the necessary tax increase? What are you going to do? No discussion of that. So you can't reach any conclusion about a path forward from that presentation. And if you do vote to move forward with that as your financial presentation, you're in dereliction of your fiduciary duty to taxpayers. There was also a comment that we need to determine what taxpayers can afford. How do you do that? How are you going to know individual taxpayers' financial situations? I don't get it. A project this large should go to referendum regardless of whether it's required or not. And as you move through this process, the public should have more than 3 minutes twice a month to comment on it. There needs to be a lot more study and evaluation of this project. You can't vote on October 9th. It makes zero sense to me.
Thank you.
Good evening. John Andrews, Lower Providence. As usual, I have a number of comments, and I expect that if I go over by 1 second, I will be shut down by someone who says, my apologies. Through an RTK, I have reviewed the pool leak report. Leaks were easily fixed. The eroded concrete after 8 years of chlorine-loaded water, not so easy, but likely doable. Was the leak tolerated in hopes of forcing a new high school? The Schrader Group's option 1 is unacceptable as it went outside the developable area bounds. It also requires partial demo of the auditorium and thus closes off access by buses and cars. Why not have them explore renovation to deliver on the required 3 concepts? Due to steep slopes, any new building concepts require extra staircases, an impediment to ADA rules. The existing building layout on level ground avoids that. The field house idea appears unattractive, adds cost, and is forced due to the small buildable area and extra desired building features. The current high school building, sized for 2,100, already contains these desired building features. Again, the cost of renovation of the current building is less than 50% of these concepts for new building. The 11-room reduction in the number of classrooms with extra space for teachers appears efficient use of space. But what are the educational and cost implications? Any experience elsewhere as told by teaching staff, not architects. Also, what are the sizes of current classrooms and PDE-sized rooms? The student capacity of each concept is 1,600, barely above the current enrollment. There is no recent enrollment projection to support this. Worcester has immense buildable farmland, and a lot can happen in 50 years. How would 1,800 students, a possible growth number, be accommodated? Presumably, a 1,600 student size was chosen to avoid a referendum. Why not a referendum in any event? Seconded by me after being pitched by Mr. Earnshaw moments ago. Lastly, what are the feedback rules for the upcoming forums, and will the events be videotaped for rebroadcast? Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Malik, Worcester. 2016 feasibility study on the pool. Both the water loss issue and structural matters should be studied immediately and a course of direction established. 8 years later, you find the leak and fix the pool when it was an emergency in 2016, and then you let 8 years of degradation of the pool go by. If you can't take care of a pool, you can't take care of a $200 million high school. Jen, all due respect, I like you. I think you're great. But I heard your presentation about how you want to go, handle this. What's the rush? That's your plan. One committee meeting one committee meeting, look it all over. I don't think that's going to work. The plan is you should put everything on hold for 6 months at least, maybe a year, and fully vet everything. Fully vet it. You guys are in like such a rush to get it done. There's so many things wrong. Dave, your presentation was an insult to taxpayers. You said something about, what's too much burden to the taxpayers? You don't think 200 million is a burden to the taxpayers. What exactly do you base that on? Can you tell me? You don't think 200 million is burdensome to the taxpayers. You don't think 4.9% increases in our taxes is burdensome. What planet are you living on? It's another insult to the taxpayers. Now, you realize that if you raise our taxes 4.9%, it just doesn't go for 1 year and then it goes away. We get the 4.9% increase and then pay that in perpetuity. So, you're acting like, well, it's 4.9%, but then, no, it stays there. That 4.9% stays there every year in perpetuity. Here's some questions for you. What is the total interest cost on $100 million and a $200 million borrowing? Give us those numbers before you go take your vote, and then the impact to the taxpayers on those. How did you come up with the $100 million estimate or the $100 million borrowing? What did you use to come up with that? Was that just a number made up out of thin air, or did you have like a plan for renovation that you actually based it on? Maybe we could see that. What happens if the Act 1 index goes below 2%? You ever think of that? What happens if your teacher negotiations don't go well and you got to pay them more money, right? We have no commercial base. All of this tax increase is on the backs of the property owners. One thing I've found in watching you guys for as long as I have is you're good at spending money. That's about it.
Thank you. Any other comments for courtesy of the floor? Any comments or questions following courtesy of the floor from the board? All right. Seeing none, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Mr. Winters, may I have a second? Ms. Alston. All right, meeting is adjourned.